A wealthy businessman noticed a child at an orphanage clutching a necklace that once belonged to his missing wife. When he questioned the boy about it, the answer left him speechless. The crisp autumn air carried whispers of wind through the trees, lining the long driveway leading to the Sunlight Haven orphanage. Dry leaves crackled under the tires of Ethan Varella's polished black car. At 45, Ethan was a man of stature, revered in the world of commerce and philanthropy. His name often graced glossy magazine covers and headlines, embodying both triumph and generosity. Yet, hidden behind his public facade was a torment that had haunted him for half a decade. The mysterious disappearance of his beloved wife, Lily. Their sprawling mansion and hollow, sleepless nights bore silent witness to her absence. Ever since Lily vanished without a trace, Ethan buried himself in work and charitable endeavors, anything to stave off the suffocating void threatening to consume him. Among his many projects was the Sunlight Haven Orphanage, a sanctuary for children in need, which he had generously funded. But today's visit carried an unshakable weight, a peculiar feeling he couldn't ignore. The orphanage, modest and welcoming, was painted in warm hues, its gardens alive with children's laughter and play. A sense of peace radiated from the place, momentarily easing the tight grip on Ethan's heart. Mark Valdivia, the orphanage's director, stepped outside with a genuine smile, greeting him warmly. "Mr. Varela, what a pleasure to see you again. Thanks to your support, we've achieved more than we ever dreamed possible." Ethan responded with a faint nod, his attention wandering to the courtyard. The children's laughter felt distant, almost dreamlike, as something else seized his focus. Across the garden, a boy with dark hair and somber eyes sat apart from the others, engrossed in a small object clasped in his hands. A jolt of emotion shot through Ethan, halting him in his tracks. The object shimmered under the sunlight, its shape stirring a deep sense of recognition. Without hesitation, he moved toward the boy, his footsteps reverberating against the stone pathway. Each step slowed time, the world seeming fragile and precarious beneath him. As he drew closer, he saw it clearly, a gold necklace with a turquoise pendant. The same necklace Lily had worn the last time he saw her. The memory rushed back with startling clarity, her luminous smile, her elegance at the charity gala that now felt a lifetime away. The image collided with reality, leaving him breathless. The boy looked up, meeting Ethan's gaze. His dark eyes held no fear or surprise, only a quiet familiarity that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. The world seemed to pause, the sound of children's laughter and Mark's voice fading into the background. "Where did you get that?" Ethan asked, his voice unsteady, trembling with disbelief and fear. The boy met his gaze without a hint of hesitation and replied, "She gave it to me." The simplicity of his statement, spoken with a calmness that felt almost surreal, struck Ethan like a lightning bolt. His chest tightened as his hands began to tremble. Those dark, unwavering eyes seemed to carry a knowledge beyond his years, secrets that no one else could comprehend. A storm of emotions swirled within Ethan, hope and fear colliding in a chaotic dance. Mark, who had stepped closer to grasp what was happening, watched Ethan with growing concern. "Mr. Varela, is everything all right?" he asked. But Ethan could barely nod, his thoughts spinning out of control. The carefully constructed world he had built around Lily's absence felt as though it was unraveling. 5 years of unanswered questions seemed to condense into the gaze of that one boy. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken truths, and Ethan knew in his gut that this moment marked the start of a journey that would change everything. The drive back to his sprawling mansion seemed to stretch on forever. City streets blurred past, glowing with the lights of storefronts and street lamps, but Ethan was somewhere else entirely. The boy's voice echoed in his mind. "She gave it to me. a haunting refrain he couldn't escape. The image of that turquoise pendant in the child's hands and the depth of his gaze replayed like a loop, dragging Ethan back to the night he had spent years trying to forget. It was the night of the charity gala, the culmination of a campaign to support orphanages and adoption programs. Lily had been radiant in her flowing blue gown, the necklace, a custom piece he had designed just for her, resting perfectly against her skin. Her laughter, light and melodic, had filled the room as she mingled with guests, embodying grace and warmth. Those memories, though beautiful, had turned into shards of pain he carried like scars. That was the night she vanished, leaving no trail, no explanation. The necklace had haunted Ethan ever since. It was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of his love, a promise he had made to her. Seeing it again, held by a boy at an orphanage, felt like an unraveling of everything he thought he knew. When he finally pulled into the driveway, the mansion stood like a monument to his grief, grand and imposing, yet empty and lifeless. The automatic lights flickered on, illuminating vast, silent hallways that had long since ceased to feel like home. Ethan sank into the cold embrace of the leather sofa in his study, facing a fireplace that hadn't been used in years. He closed his eyes, allowing the weight of memories to crash over him. After Lily's disappearance, he had left no stone unturned. He'd poured his fortune into hiring top detectives, developing cutting-edge search technologies, and pursuing every lead, no matter how tenuous. Yet every effort ended in dead ends and dashed hopes, leaving him trapped in a cycle of loss and despair. As each promising lead dissolved into nothing, Ethan fell further into the anguish he carefully masked with a veneer of composure and achievement. But now, with the necklace in the hands of a child, a glimmer of hope broke through, though it carried with it an edge of dread. What did it mean that this boy had Lily's necklace? What link did he have to her disappearance? The weight of unanswered questions bore down on him, blending anxiety with a fragile sliver of possibility. His thoughts raced as he grabbed his phone. Only one person came to mind for this kind of enigma: David Herrera, a seasoned private investigator known for his grit and ingenuity, someone who thrived on solving the unsolvable. Without hesitation, Ethan dialed. "David, it's Ethan Varela. I need your help with something," he said, his voice steady, but carrying a strain David hadn't heard before. "Ethan, always good to hear from you. What's the situation?" David asked, his tone direct and professional. "It's personal," Ethan replied carefully. "I need you to investigate a boy named Charlie. He's at the House of the Sun orphanage and—" He paused, his breath catching. "He has something that belonged to Lily." Silence filled the line for a moment. But it wasn't empty. It was the kind of pause that carried weight. David understood the gravity of that name, the history tied to it, a story he had pieced together through whispers and confidences. "I'll get started right away," David said at last, his voice resolute. The call ended, but the knot in Ethan's chest only tightened. He walked to the window of his study, staring out at the sprawling city below, its lights glittering like a vast, endless sea. For the first time in years, he felt that all his fruitless searching might have led him to this moment. Yet the thought of what he might uncover stirred a fear he had never known before. Ethan realized that his life was teetering on the edge of change, and though the path ahead was unclear, one thing burned bright within him. He wouldn't stop until he unearthed the truth. David Herrera didn't waste a moment diving into the case. A man in his early 50s, with a graying beard and sharp, observant eyes, he had earned his reputation as one of the most skilled private investigators in the business. His office, cluttered with stacks of files and maps scribbled with meticulous notes, became ground zero for the search to unravel Charlie's story and its ties to Lily. The first few days moved slowly. David combed through records from the House of the Sun orphanage, studying Charlie's file and details about his arrival. What little he uncovered hinted at a tangled web of secrets, a puzzle that only deepened the mystery of the boy's past. He was discovered at a small rural hospital when he was about 3 years old. No identification, no records, just wrapped in a blanket with a name stitched into it. Eleanor. The moment David read that name, something clicked. Without hesitation, he called Ethan to share the discovery. "Ethan, I've been going through the records from the orphanage, and there's something you need to hear. Charlie was found in a rural hospital wrapped in a blanket with the name Eleanor embroidered on it," he said, his tone steady but carrying an edge of urgency. A heavy silence followed, pressing on Ethan like a physical weight. The name seemed to hang in the air, stirring a swirl of emotions he could barely process. "Do you think it could have a connection to Lily?" he asked, though deep down he already felt the answer taking shape. "It's very possible. I also found that the hospital where Charlie was left is in the same region where a car accident was reported on the night Lily disappeared." David's response added a chilling layer of intrigue to an already puzzling case. For Ethan, it was the spark that ignited a sense of urgency he hadn't felt in years. After so long spent chasing shadows, this tangible clue propelled him into action. He decided he needed to see Charlie again, to look him in the eye and uncover anything that might explain Lily's connection to this boy. The very next morning, Ethan arrived at the orphanage earlier than planned. Rachel, the director, greeted him at the door, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Mr. Varela, it's good to see you again so soon. Is everything all right?" she asked. Forcing a smile to mask the storm within, Ethan replied, "I need to speak with Charlie again. There are things I need to understand." Rachel, always empathetic, studied him for a moment before nodding. "Of course," she said, and guided him toward the garden, where Charlie sat playing by himself, as he often did. The boy glanced up as Ethan approached, his serious gaze meeting Ethan, as with a clarity and depth that stopped him in his tracks. It felt as though Charlie knew something vital. "Hello, Charlie," Ethan said, his voice softer than he'd anticipated. He knelt to meet the boy's level, his eyes fixed on the necklace still hanging around Charlie's neck. The child remained silent, his small hands fidgeting with the turquoise pendant as though it were a lifeline. The gentle rustling of leaves in the nearby trees filled the air, the sound almost meditative. Ethan steadied himself, exhaling deeply before speaking. "Do you remember the woman who gave you that necklace?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. Charlie's dark eyes never wavered from his, and after a long pause he nodded. "Sometimes I see her in my dreams," the boy said, his words soft but laced with a wisdom far beyond his years. "She told me to protect the necklace and said that one day someone would come for it." Charlie's words sent a shiver through Ethan, the kind that comes when you're on the brink of a revelation. The pieces of a long unsolved puzzle seemed to shift into place, but with them came an avalanche of new questions. What did Charlie truly remember? What had he experienced in his early childhood that lingered in his mind? Before Ethan could press further, Rachel walked over, her expression uneasy. "Mr. Varela, there's something else I think you should know. Charlie has talked in his sleep about a woman who sang him lullabies and a cold, dark place. He always repeats the same phrase, 'Everything will be okay when he comes.'" Ethan felt his knees weaken under the weight of her words. The mystery surrounding Charlie and Lily grew more tangled, no longer just coincidence, but something far deeper. What started as a visit to the orphanage now felt like the beginning of a journey that would unravel truths Ethan hadn't dared to imagine. In the days after David's revelation and Charlie's startling words, Ethan's life shifted entirely. The work and charity commitments that had once defined his days fell to the side as his obsession with the connection between Charlie and Lily consumed him. Nights were the worst. His mansion, so silent and vast, became a stage for memories of Lily and the echoes of Charlie's voice. Sleep became impossible as questions gnawed at him, leaving him restless. Ethan began visiting the orphanage more frequently, his presence becoming a regular occurrence that did not go unnoticed by Rachel. The perceptive director couldn't help but observe the growing bond between the millionaire and the boy who had spent years under her care. One quiet afternoon, as Ethan sat on a garden bench, watching Charlie play in thoughtful silence, Rachel approached. Her voice was steady, but curious. "Mr. Varela, may I ask what brings you here so often these days?" Ethan, still focused on Charlie, took a long moment before finally turning to face her. He realized it was time to share a part of the truth. "Rachel, I believe Charlie has a connection to my wife, Lily. She disappeared 5 years ago." His voice wavered slightly as he continued. "That necklace," he gestured toward Charlie, "I gave it to her. And the things he says about a woman, and that phrase he keeps repeating, I can't ignore the possibility that there's more to his story." Rachel's face shifted from curiosity to shock, and then to understanding. She nodded slowly, processing the gravity of his words. "Charlie has always been a bit different, Mr. Varela," she said softly. "He has this calmness about him, something you don't usually see in kids his age. It's as if he's been through things he can't quite remember, but those memories linger somewhere deep inside. I think, in pieces, they're still there." Her voice was filled with compassion, her belief in Charlie's unspoken story clear. Rachel's words lingered in Ethan's mind. Charlie wasn't just a link to Lily. He appeared to be at the very center of the unanswered questions surrounding her. Driven by determination, Ethan rose and walked toward Charlie, intent on observing him more closely in hopes of finding clues in his behavior or words. Charlie was kneeling on the ground, tracing shapes in the dirt with a stick. When Ethan approached, the boy glanced up, his deep, knowing eyes locking onto Ethan's. Without waiting for permission, Ethan sat down beside him and studied the drawing. A figure of a woman standing next to a child. The level of detail was remarkable for someone so young. The woman wore a long dress, and a necklace was prominently depicted around her neck. "Who is she, Charlie?" Ethan asked, his voice barely steady, trembling with the weight of his emotions. Charlie looked down at the drawing, then back at Ethan. "She's the woman who sings to me in my dreams. She always tells me that one day I'll be safe," the boy replied, his tone calm but filled with a gravity far beyond his years. The words struck Ethan like a bolt of lightning. Could it be that Charlie not only knew Lily, but that she had been protecting him for reasons Ethan had yet to uncover? Before he could ask another question, Rachel approached with a troubled expression. "There's something else, Mr. Varela. Since you've been visiting the orphanage more often, I've noticed strange things. Papers have been moved in my office, and I've received anonymous phone calls where no one says anything. It's as if someone's been watching us," she said, her voice low and uneasy. Rachel's revelation sent a jolt of alarm through Ethan. If someone else was paying attention to the events at the orphanage, it meant they weren't alone in their search for answers. The thought of an unseen threat heightened Ethan's urgency. He knew he needed to protect Charlie and uncover the truth about Lily before time ran out. This wasn't just about resolving the haunting questions of his past anymore. He was stepping into a dangerous unknown. Charlie wasn't simply a boy without a family. He was the key to unraveling the mystery of Lily's disappearance and the secrets she had gone to great lengths to safeguard. Meanwhile, David Herrera was relentless in his investigation. His office had become a chaotic hub of papers, photographs, and scribbled notes, each one a thread in the intricate web of connections he was piecing together. The trail of evidence surrounding Lily's disappearance led him to an old police report buried in the archives. It mentioned a car accident on a rural road the very night Lily had vanished. The connection was undeniable. The report detailed a high-end car found overturned in a roadside ditch, yet when authorities arrived, the vehicle was empty. There was no blood, no evidence of a struggle, just lingering questions. A nearby resident had reported seeing a woman climb out of the wreck, unsteady on her feet, holding something close to her chest before vanishing into the night. David quickly relayed the discovery to Ethan. "Ethan, I came across a report about an accident on the same night Lily disappeared. The location matches where Charlie was found," David said, his voice carrying the weight of the revelation. On the other end of the line, Ethan felt his breath catch. He gripped the edge of his desk, trying to steady himself. "Are you saying Lily might have had an accident and then—" His voice trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "We don't know what happened after the crash," David replied, "but the witness saw a woman leaving the car and heading into the woods. The details are vague, but there are too many coincidences to ignore." The call left Ethan with more uncertainties than answers, yet one idea began to solidify in his mind. Lily had survived the crash, at least for a short time, and Charlie was somehow tied to what happened that night. The possibility that she had shielded the child, leaving him at the rural hospital before disappearing, gnawed at him. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan resolved to visit the accident site. He needed to see it for himself, to stand where Lily might have spent her last moments of bravery. Sensing the potential danger of the situation, David insisted on joining him. The road was a winding stretch, flanked by dense, quiet forest, the kind of place that seemed frozen in time. When they arrived at the location noted in the police report, Ethan stepped out of the car into the stillness of the night. Only their flashlights pierced the suffocating darkness. "This is it," David said, gesturing toward faint, weathered tire tracks leading into the ditch. Though overgrown with weeds after 5 years, the site carried an eerie presence that made Ethan's skin prickle. They followed the trail into the woods, retracing the steps of the unknown woman from the witness's account. Twigs snapped beneath their boots, and the oppressive silence seemed to press against them. After a short walk, they stumbled upon a faint path winding through the trees, a barely discernible trail leading toward the rural hospital where Charlie had been discovered. The connection felt undeniable, and Ethan shivered at the thought of Lily, possibly injured and alone, carrying a child through the night to find shelter. Could she have left Charlie here, then disappeared? Ethan whispered, the question more for himself than David. David nodded, though the thought brought no solace, only deeper unease. If Lily had made it to the hospital, why had she left Charlie behind? And what had become of her after that? The questions mounted as they stood in the darkness, the tension around them growing thicker. Then, a sudden crackling sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the woods, breaking the silence and sending a jolt through both men. Someone was watching them. They spun around, flashlights darting through the dense brush, but all they saw were shadows and branches swaying in the breeze. The sense of unease tightened its grip. This was no longer just a search for family answers. It had become something far more perilous. The discovery of the accident site and the trail to the hospital brought Ethan closer to uncovering the truth. But he also understood that what lay ahead could irrevocably change his life. The newfound clues compelled Ethan and David to dig deeper, going beyond what Ethan had believed he knew about Lily's life. The Varela mansion, once a place of comfort filled with memories and old photographs, now felt like a labyrinth of unanswered questions. Walking its quiet corridors, Ethan racked his brain for any overlooked detail, anything that might explain the double life he was beginning to suspect Lily had led. Meanwhile, David threw himself into his work, piecing together connections that drew a startling picture. His research led him to an international humanitarian group Lily had once been involved with. What at first seemed like ordinary charitable work turned out to be something much riskier, a covert effort to dismantle human trafficking networks. It was a mission fraught with danger, and Lily had been in the thick of it. Late one night, David stumbled upon something that froze him in his tracks. The Raven, a code name that repeatedly surfaced in classified reports and witness accounts, was identified as the head of one of the most ruthless human trafficking organizations. He was a shadowy figure, infamous for his brutality and his ability to eliminate those who opposed him. According to the records, the Raven had been directly involved in a raid Lily and her team had tried to thwart shortly before she vanished. For Ethan, the discovery was a sobering blow. The image of Lily he had carried all these years began to shift. She wasn't just the loving wife he had cherished, she was also a courageous woman who had put herself on the line to protect others, and possibly Charlie. A wave of pride and admiration surged through him, but it was accompanied by an overwhelming sense of dread. If the Raven was still out there, then everyone connected to this, especially Charlie, was in danger. On a stormy night, David arrived at the mansion with files in hand. They sat in the study, rain beating against the windows as David laid out the documents on the marble table. Ethan leaned over the papers, scanning them in silence, his expression unreadable. The evidence detailed Lily's involvement in secret operations, covert meetings, and a failed attempt to expose high-profile figures shielding the trafficking ring. One note stood out, a chilling line underlined for emphasis. "They know. Be careful." "The Raven isn't just a man," Ethan said, breaking the tense silence. "He's a shadow, operating in the highest levels of power. This explains Lily's disappearance. It wasn't an accident. She sacrificed herself to protect something or someone. And now I'm certain that someone is Charlie." David gave a grim nod, his expression tightening. "There's more, Ethan. If the Raven was the force behind the network Lily tried to bring down, we're up against someone with immense power, resources, and zero hesitation to eliminate threats. If he's still active, it's only a matter of time before he notices what we're doing." The weight of his words hung heavy in the room. Rain pounded against the windows, amplifying the gravity of the moment. Ethan's gaze drifted to the glass, catching his own reflection. A man who once saw himself as invincible, now realizing how small he was compared to the reach of a shadowy, untouchable empire. The next visit to the orphanage carried a different energy. Rachel met them with visible worry etched across her face. As Ethan shared the story of the Raven and Lily's dangerous role, her complexion paled. "This explains so much," Rachel murmured. "The children we've taken in from the area, including Charlie, have such similar stories. Some speak of a woman who helped them, who brought them to safety. Lily didn't just save Charlie, Mr. Varela. She may have been fighting to save countless others." Across the room, Charlie had been quietly observing. Though he couldn't grasp everything being said, his expression revealed a blend of fear and curiosity as he processed the pieces he could understand. Ethan walked over, his smile gentle but strained as he tried to offer comfort. "I promise you, Charlie, everything will be okay. We'll find the truth, and we'll keep you safe," he said, the words carrying a weight that felt like a vow, not just to the boy, but to Lily, and to the part of himself that had never stopped searching for her. Yet deep inside, both Ethan and David understood the reality. Taking on the Raven meant stepping into a fight that could lead them to the edge of survival. They were about to face a darkness deeper than either of them had ever imagined. The days following the revelation about the Raven became a flurry of tension and urgency. Ethan and David threw themselves into the work, connecting every thread that tied Lily, Charlie, and the sprawling human trafficking network. The more they uncovered, the more the danger loomed, but they both knew they couldn't stop, not now, when the stakes were higher than ever. The ever-present sense of danger at the House of the Sun orphanage became impossible to ignore. Rachel, deeply concerned for the children's safety, ramped up security measures. She installed new locks on all major access points and set up security cameras to monitor the premises. Staff were instructed to remain alert for anything suspicious. But despite these precautions, the eerie feeling of being watched lingered. At night, some caregivers reported seeing shadowy figures near the fences or unexplained flickering lights. One morning, while going through the office early, Rachel discovered an anonymous note slipped under the door. The message, written in small, jagged handwriting, read, "We know what you're looking for. Stop, or you'll face the consequences." Fear gripped her, but it only strengthened her resolve. She wasted no time contacting Ethan and showing him the note. He held it in his hands, his jaw tight and his eyes blazing with anger and determination. "This means we're onto something big," he said, his voice steady but filled with intensity. "And they know it." David arrived shortly after and studied the note with a grim expression. "The Raven and his people are feeling the heat. This is a warning, but it's also proof that we're on the right track. We can't back down now," he said firmly. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, Ethan decided it was time to bring Rachel fully into their strategy. She wasn't just a trusted ally, she cared deeply about the children and understood the stakes better than most. As David outlined the network's tactics, how they relied on intermediaries and powerful connections to stay hidden, Rachel remembered something that could be pivotal. Over the past few months, some of the children who have come here didn't have any identification, she said thoughtfully, mentally sorting through their records. But their stories were strikingly similar. Many talked about a woman who helped them escape. She would take them to hospitals or safe locations before disappearing. They described her as having a gentle voice, dark hair, and a look in her eyes that made them feel safe. Ethan's chest tightened at her words. It had to be Lily. The truth was becoming undeniable. Lily hadn't just been working to dismantle a dangerous network from within. She had also been rescuing its victims. She had put herself at unimaginable risk, not just to expose the system, but to save the lives of the children ensnared by it. Ethan's admiration for her grew, but so did his fear. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous the path became. But one thing was clear. Lily's mission was far bigger than he had ever realized. Charlie, who had been quietly playing in the garden, but always seemed tuned in to the conversations around him, walked up to Ethan and gently tugged on the sleeve of his jacket. "Are we going to find the woman who sang to me?" he asked, his voice soft, yet filled with a surprising certainty. Ethan knelt to meet the boy's gaze, seeing in Charlie's eyes a reflection of the courage Lily had always shown. In that moment, he knew he had to keep his word, not just for Charlie, but for all the children Lily had fought to protect. "Yes, Charlie," Ethan said firmly. "We're going to find her, and no one will ever hurt you again." That night, as they sifted through records and testimonies from the children, David uncovered something that sent a chill through the room. One name surfaced repeatedly in connection with facilitating adoptions and the movement of children: Jack Ross. A well-known businessman with deep political ties and a spotless reputation, Ross seemed above suspicion. But confidential documents painted a far darker picture. They suggested he was deeply embedded in trafficking networks, acting as a middleman between powerful elites and criminal organizations. Ethan understood that confronting someone like Ross would escalate the investigation to a dangerous new level. Yet he also knew there was no turning back. The Raven's influence was closer than ever, and if there was any chance Lily was alive, Ross and his network likely held the answers they needed, not only about her disappearance, but about the sacrifices she had made to save others. The orphanage, once a sanctuary, had now become the focal point of both discovery and peril. Nights grew longer and more unsettling, every sound amplified by the constant tension hanging over them. The sense that a climactic confrontation was approaching was inescapable. Ethan, Rachel, and David pressed forward with their investigation, fitting more pieces of the puzzle together, even as the danger loomed larger. The anonymous warnings, shadowy figures around the orphanage, and unspoken threats served as constant reminders of the formidable enemy they faced. But Ethan and David knew there was still one lead they had to chase before confronting Jack Ross. The key lay with Emily, the nurse who had been working at the rural hospital the night Charlie was brought in. Emily had spent most of her career in remote hospitals, but after that fateful night 5 years ago, she had moved to the city, retreating into a quiet life in a modest apartment, far from the public eye. When David tracked her down, he found a woman in her 50s with a face lined by years of hard work and a gaze that spoke of vigilance and caution. She agreed to meet them, but not at her apartment. She was afraid someone was watching her. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe tucked into a secluded part of the city. Emily arrived promptly, bundled in a coat that couldn't quite hide her unease. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning every corner as if expecting someone to follow her. "Mr. Varela, Mr. Herrera," she said, lowering herself into the seat with a shaky sigh. "You don't know how long I've waited to share this, but I've been so scared. I saw things I wasn't supposed to see." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady and reassuring. "Emily, anything you can tell us is crucial. The woman you saw that night, what happened?" Emily took a shaky sip of her coffee, her hands trembling against the cup. "It was late, after midnight, when the hospital doors flew open," she began. "A woman came in, injured, pale, but there was something in her eyes, a determination I'll never forget. She was carrying a child, holding him so tightly, like he was her entire world. When I rushed to help her, she begged me, 'Take care of him. Don't let anyone find him. Tell him someone will come for him someday.'" Emily's voice faltered, and Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. The strength, the love in those words, they could only be Lily's. "What happened next?" David asked gently, trying to keep her talking. Emily took a deep breath, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The woman collapsed not long after. Before I could call for help, there were sounds outside, footsteps, fast and purposeful. She looked at me and whispered, 'Run. Now.' I didn't ask questions. I ran. But when I came back with help, she was gone. The boy was lying on a stretcher, clutching the necklace he was wearing, like it was all he had left." Her voice broke off as the cafe's soft murmur filled the silence that followed. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Lily had risked everything to protect Charlie, but the unanswered questions loomed larger than ever. Who had been chasing her? And why had she vanished without a trace? David, his tone sharp and focused, pressed on. "Emily, has anyone tried to contact you since then? Threatened you in any way?" Emily nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with fear. "Yes, I got calls, messages, telling me to forget what I saw. That's why I left the hospital and moved here. But I've never been able to forget her. The look in her eyes, the way she protected that child. I knew someone would come for him one day. And now, here you are." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand in his. "Thank you, Emily. What you've told us is more important than you know. Lily gave everything to keep Charlie safe, and now we're closer to understanding why. Emily nodded, but the worry in her expression didn't fade entirely. When the meeting ended, Ethan and David left the cafe with their minds racing. The new revelations only deepened their questions, but they also gave them a renewed sense of purpose. Lily hadn't run away. She had sacrificed everything for Charlie. Emily, have you been threatened since that night? Has anyone tried to intimidate or harm you? Ethan asked, his voice steady but urgent. Emily nodded, her eyes glimmering with fear. Yes, I got phone calls and messages, warnings to forget what I saw. That's why I left the hospital and came here. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never forget her. Her face, the way she looked at that child, it stayed with me. I always believed someone would come for him someday, and now I know that day has finally come. Ethan reached across the table, his gratitude evident as he took Emily's hand. Thank you, Emily. What you've told us means more than you realize. Now we understand just how far Lily went to protect Charlie, and we're closer to uncovering the truth. Emily nodded, though worry lingered in her expression. When the meeting ended, Ethan and David left the cafe, their thoughts racing with new questions, but fueled by a stronger resolve. Lily hadn't abandoned them. She had been fighting to save them all. Later that night, Ethan sat in his study, the desk lamp casting a soft glow over the room. He sank into the leather chair, the weight of Emily's revelations pressing heavily on his shoulders. The image of Lily, injured but determined, carrying Charlie to safety, stirred something deep within him. Unable to rest, he felt drawn to search through the few belongings Lily had left behind. He approached the old wooden desk that had once belonged to his mother, a piece Lily had always loved. She had a habit of tucking small keepsakes and notes into its hidden compartments. With trembling fingers, Ethan ran his hand along the edge of the desk, searching for the spring he knew was there. Finally, he felt a soft click, and a secret compartment slid open. Inside was a small, worn leather notebook, its cover coated with dust. Ethan lifted it carefully, cradling it as if it might shatter. He knew without a doubt that this was something significant. When he opened the diary, the faint scent of aged paper and ink wafted into the room. The first few pages were mundane, lists, appointments, and scattered reflections. But as he turned the pages, the tone shifted. Her words became sharper, revealing a life of danger and courage that Ethan had barely glimpsed. Lily had chronicled her time with the humanitarian organization, detailing covert missions and the incredible risks she had taken. But it was the final entries that stopped Ethan in his tracks. The handwriting was hurried, the ink smudged as though tears had fallen on the pages. These were confessions, raw and urgent. One name stood out, written repeatedly: the Raven. Her notes were laced with fear and determination. The Raven isn't just a man, he's a network, a shadow that spreads everywhere. He's following me. I can feel it. But I won't stop. Charlie has to be safe, even if it means disappearing. Ethan will never understand, but this is for him, for us. This boy is the key to taking down the network, but he's also the reason I'm in danger. Ethan, his hands tightened around the notebook as he read her words, his heart pounding. This wasn't just about uncovering what happened to Lily. This was about finishing what she had started, no matter the cost. The final entries in Lily's diary were the most heart-wrenching. She detailed the decision she made on the eve of her disappearance. If you're reading this, Ethan, it means things have spiraled beyond my control. Take care of Charlie. He's not just a boy, he's proof, the evidence that could save so many lives. I love him more than words can convey. And you, Ethan, I love you more than I ever had the courage to show." Ethan closed the diary, his hands trembling, his eyes filled with unshed tears. It felt like a message sent across time, Lily's last act of love and bravery. But it was also a call to action, a plea he couldn't ignore. She had trusted him with Charlie's life and the truth about her disappearance. Now, it was his turn to honor that trust. David arrived at the mansion shortly after receiving Ethan's urgent call. One look at Ethan told him something significant had been uncovered. "David, I found Lily's diary," Ethan said, handing him the worn notebook. David took it with the care of someone handling a precious artifact and began reading in silence. His face darkened as he absorbed the words, his expression sharpening with each page. "This is it," David said finally, his voice steady but grave. "The Raven isn't just a code name. It's the name of an organization. Its influence stretches to the highest levels. If Charlie is the proof Lily mentioned, then he must have seen or heard something that could expose the entire network. That's why she did what she did." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "We have to protect Charlie no matter what. But we also need to help him remember, whatever he knows, even if he doesn't realize it yet." The enormity of their task settled over them like a heavy weight. The mission to protect Charlie and uncover the truth behind the Raven was only just beginning. Lily had sacrificed everything to ensure the boy's safety, and Ethan now fully grasped the depth of her love and courage. What had started as a desperate quest for answers was evolving into a battle against a hidden and dangerous force. But for the first time, Ethan didn't feel alone. Lily was with him, in her words, her courage, and every choice she had made. The discovery of Lily's diary marked a turning point in their investigation. Her words confirmed the undeniable link between Charlie and the Raven's network. Ethan realized the boy was the key to unraveling it all, but they needed to help Charlie unlock the fragmented memories of his past. Ethan arranged a visit to the orphanage, this time accompanied by David and Rachel, whose dedication to protecting the children had made her an indispensable ally. The morning was serene, the garden bathed in golden sunlight. Charlie sat quietly beneath a tree, sketching in his notebook as he often did, unaware of the critical role he played in the fight unfolding around him. When Charlie spotted Ethan, his face lit up, and he ran toward him, holding his notebook up high with pride. "Look, Ethan, I drew a boat," he exclaimed, showing off a picture of a small boat bobbing on the ocean, surrounded by waves and seagulls. Ethan smiled warmly, but as he flipped through the pages, his attention caught on an earlier drawing tucked deeper into the notebook. The image made his chest tighten. A woman with dark hair and sad eyes standing beside a child holding a necklace with a turquoise stone. The scene was painfully familiar, and Ethan had to take a steadying breath to compose himself. "Charlie, this drawing," he said softly, "is it something you imagined, or do you remember it?" He kept his voice calm, protective, not wanting to alarm the boy. Charlie frowned, his little face scrunching as he concentrated, like he was reaching for a memory buried deep. "Sometimes I dream about it," he said slowly. "She sings to me so I can sleep, and she always says I have to be brave." His voice carried a seriousness far beyond his years, and his expression reflected a maturity that sent a chill through Ethan. David, who had been standing nearby, crouched down to Charlie's level and pulled out a small recorder he often used during investigations. "Charlie," he said gently, "would you mind telling us more about those dreams? Anything you remember might help us." David's voice was calm and inviting, and after a brief hesitation, Charlie nodded. He sat down on the grass and began to speak in a measured, deliberate tone. She was scared, But she always smiled when she looked at me, Charlie began. One night, I saw her talking to a man with a dark face. I couldn't see his eyes. She yelled at him, and he told her she would never be safe. After that, she took me to the car and said we were going to a safe place. Then I woke up in the hospital. I never saw her again. Charlie's voice trailed off, his eyes distant, as if the scene were playing out in his mind all over again. The revelation left Ethan speechless. It was the clearest memory Charlie had ever shared, and it aligned perfectly with what Lily had written in her diary. She had taken Charlie to the hospital to protect him, likely from the Raven or someone working for him. Rachel, tears welling in her eyes, knelt beside Charlie and gently stroked his hair. "You're so brave, Charlie. You've helped us so much," she said, with a warm smile. David stopped the recorder and gave Ethan a knowing look, a subtle nod that confirmed they were getting closer. Charlie's memories weren't just fragments anymore. They were pieces of a puzzle coming together. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the garden, a quiet unease settled over the scene. Ethan knelt beside Charlie and placed a reassuring hand on his small shoulder. "I promise this will be over soon," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You'll be safe, just like she wanted." The weight of that promise lingered between them, a vow that carried all of Ethan's determination and his love for the woman who had given everything to protect this child. The boy glanced at Ethan, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of recognition lit up his eyes. That evening, as Ethan and David strategized their next move, an unknown number disrupted their conversation. When Ethan answered, a distorted voice whispered chillingly through the receiver, "We know you're getting close. Stop now, or the child will pay the price." The threat sent a chill through the air. The Ravens network was aware of their progress, and Charlie's safety, along with everyone else's, was now dangerously fragile. Ethan and David exchanged a tense look, unspoken understanding passing between them. They were nearing the end of the line, and Charlie's protection was paramount. The call left them on edge, fully aware that the enemy was watching their every move. Yet Charlie's recollections and the insights from Lily's diary had carved out a path they couldn't abandon. They needed confirmation, and there was only one person who might provide it. James, a former associate of Lily's from the humanitarian organization. James had vanished from public life not long after Lily's disappearance, with rumors suggesting he had fled the country out of fear. But David, leveraging his knack for finding those who didn't want to be found, had tracked him to the outskirts of the city. Living under an alias, James had secluded himself in a cabin deep in the woods, where the meeting was set to take place. As Ethan and David approached the cabin at dusk, their car's headlights illuminated the winding forest path. The shadows of the tall trees danced ominously, as if warning them to turn back. James stood waiting at the entrance, a man with graying hair, wary eyes, and an air of someone accustomed to looking over his shoulder. His worn jacket hung loosely, and his hands stayed buried in his pockets, ready for a quick escape, if needed. "Ethan Varela and David Herrera," James said, his tone direct and his voice devoid of warmth. "I never thought I'd meet you in person. If you're here, it means you're prepared to face what most people are too scared to confront." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of James's words. "We need the truth," he said firmly, "about Lily and about Charlie." James sighed heavily, his shoulders sagging under years of secrets and fear. He motioned for them to come inside. The cabin was modest and cluttered, the dim light from a crackling fire in the stone fireplace barely illuminating the stacks of boxes and scattered documents. They gathered around a makeshift table where James began to speak, his voice heavy with both reverence and regret. "Lily was the best of us," he started, his eyes distant as he recalled her bravery. "She joined the organization with a kind of passion that's rare. She knew the risks better than anyone, but she still went all in, because she believed in protecting the innocent, no matter the cost." He paused, his jaw tightening before continuing. "When she infiltrated the Ravens network, she warned us it was worse than we ever imagined. It wasn't just human trafficking. The network had ties to powerful politicians and untouchable businessmen. She uncovered things that could bring down giants." James's words confirmed what Ethan and David had begun to piece together. Lily's mission had been far more dangerous than they'd understood, and the truth she had discovered was a threat to those who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Charlie wasn't just any child. David, always focused, leaned in and asked, "Why Charlie? What makes him so critical?" James turned his gaze toward Ethan, his expression filled with an understanding of the weight Ethan carried. Charlie witnessed something, a transaction that could blow the entire network apart. Lily pulled him out of one of their operating hubs. His survival was living proof of the horrors they were committing. She knew protecting him meant destroying the network from within. But everything changed when she discovered a traitor in the organization. The cabin's atmosphere grew heavier, each word James spoke confirming what Ethan had already suspected from Lily's diary. Charlie wasn't just a victim. He was the linchpin to exposing the Raven and all those tied to the operation. "When Lily vanished," James continued, his voice trembling slightly, "we knew she'd been found out. She left breadcrumbs, fragments of intel, for those of us who could piece them together, but the network started silencing anyone who knew too much. I was one of the few who managed to escape before they came after me." Ethan closed his eyes, trying to process the flood of emotions. Lily's courage, the sacrifices she made, they were greater than he'd ever imagined. "If she's alive," he said softly, his voice nearly breaking, "do you think there's any chance of finding her?" James's expression wavered between compassion and despair. "I don't know," he admitted, "but there are whispers. They say the Raven kept her alive because she's more valuable that way. If that's true, the only way to find her and take down the network is to protect Charlie and help him recover the memories that could incriminate them." David nodded, his face resolute. "We have to act quickly, Ethan. They know we're closing in. If the Raven realizes Charlie is the key, they won't hesitate to come for him." The decision was clear. Protecting Charlie and uncovering the truth about Lily became their top priority. As they stepped out of the cabin, the cold night air wrapped around them, thick with an unshakable tension. The forest was dark, its shadows stretching endlessly, but Ethan felt a renewed fire within him. He had promised to keep Charlie safe and uncover what had happened to Lily, and now, more than ever, he understood just how close they were to the truth. Yet with every step forward, the danger loomed larger. The Raven's reach was vast, and time was running out. They couldn't ignore the weight of James's revelations. Each word confirmed they were on the brink of both discovery and confrontation, with a force more dangerous than they had dared to imagine. When Ethan and David pulled up to the orphanage, Rachel was already waiting at the door, her expression clouded with worry. Inside, the lights flickered sporadically, and the staff moved anxiously, double-checking locks and securing windows. The tension in the air was palpable, a clear sign that something had shifted. "We got another warning," Rachel said quietly, handing Ethan a folded piece of paper she had found on the front steps earlier that day. The neatly written note delivered an unmistakable threat. "Last chance. Stay away, or you'll pay in blood." David took the note, scrutinizing it for any clues. There was nothing to indicate who had left it, but its mere presence confirmed that the Raven and his network were watching their every move. "They're trying to scare us," David said, his voice steady. "But we can't let them. We're too close to stop now." Ethan nodded, though his voice carried an edge as he replied, "We're closer than ever to finding the truth and keeping Charlie safe." Despite the confidence in his words, the tension in his chest was undeniable. Rachel, her concern evident, added, "I've strengthened the security here, but this is beyond anything we're prepared to handle. If they decide to make a move, I'm not sure we can hold them off." As they strategized their next steps, a small figure appeared in the doorway. Charlie, awakened by the commotion and flickering lights, stood rubbing his eyes. Taking in the serious faces of the adults, he walked over to Ethan and grabbed his hand tightly. "Don't be scared, Ethan," he said softly. "She always told me everything would be okay in the end." Charlie's words, spoken with a calm certainty far beyond his years, hit Ethan like a wave. It was as if Lily herself was speaking through him, offering reassurance and reminding him why this fight mattered. Kneeling to meet Charlie's gaze, Ethan gripped his hand gently but firmly. "No one's going to hurt you, Charlie. I promise," he said, his voice filled with resolve. David, watching the exchange, made up his mind. They couldn't keep reacting. They needed to take action. "Ethan," he said, breaking the silence, "we can't wait for them to come to us. If the Raven knows we're this close, we need to strike first. Charlie can't stay here. It's too dangerous. We'll take him somewhere safe while we figure out how to use what he knows to bring the network down." Ethan understood the truth in David's words and nodded, knowing it was the only viable path forward. Rachel, though reluctant to see Charlie leave, agreed with the plan. "I'll make sure the orphanage is secure," she said, her face lined with worry. "The other kids need to be safe too." Their decision was clear. They would shield Charlie, no matter the cost, and prepare to face the Raven head-on. Time was running out, and they couldn't afford to fail. "Do what you have to do. But please come back with good news," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear that gripped her. The night passed with constant watchfulness. As the lights in the orphanage flickered out and the place fell into an eerie silence, David worked swiftly, preparing the necessary documents and mapping out an evacuation plan to move Charlie to a safe location outside the city. They knew it was a drastic step, but it was crucial to keep him out of harm's way. Just before dawn, as they finished packing Charlie's belongings and were about to leave, the sound of glass shattering from the back of the orphanage froze them in their tracks. A flash of light, followed by a muffled bang, was quickly followed by the shrill wail of alarms. Someone had broken in. David reacted instantly, drawing his gun and heading toward the source of the noise. Ethan, clutching Charlie's hand tightly, followed close behind, his heart racing in his chest. The confrontation they had feared had arrived, and the battle to protect Charlie and uncover the truth about Lily was about to begin. The orphanage, once a haven of laughter and hope, had turned into a battlefield of tension and fear. The alarms blared, their wail sounding like cries of desperation, while the lights flickered, casting long shadows that moved eerily across the walls. David moved down the hallway with his gun raised, every step cautious, every breath measured. Ethan, with Charlie pressed against him, struggled to steady his pounding heart. The adrenaline surged through his veins, giving him a sense of urgency that almost felt suffocating. A sudden creak to the left snapped David's attention, and without thinking, he fired a shot that ricocheted off the wall, sending bits of plaster flying. The hooded figure that had appeared backed away, but not before locking eyes with Ethan, a chilling reminder that they were trapped. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, the danger now far too real. "Get out of here now," David barked, his voice taut with urgency. Rachel emerged at the end of the hallway, pale and breathing rapidly. but her stance was resolute. She looked like a warrior in the face of chaos, her expression steady, though fear still flickered in her eyes. "Go! I'll cover you," she shouted, pointing toward the back exit. Without a second thought, Ethan grabbed Charlie's hand and ran toward the door. The cold night air hit them like a slap across the face as they sprinted across the yard to David's car, the engine already running. The crackle of branches and the shadows of trees swaying in the moonlight reminded them that they were far from alone. A gunshot rang out behind them, and instinctively, Ethan shielded Charlie with his body. Rachel stood at the door, her eyes wild as she scanned the room, trying to pinpoint the source of the gunshot. Another blast rang out, and the window shattered, sending glass flying across the floor. The sound of children's screams, startled from their sleep, pierced through the chaos, adding a layer of panic to the already tense atmosphere. David had made it to the exit, but just before he could reach them, a dark figure sprang from the shadows, charging at him with the force of a freight train. They collided, falling to the floor in a violent tangle of fists and frantic movement. David's gun was knocked from his hand, skidding across the room and disappearing under a piece of furniture. Ethan, only a few feet away, froze for what felt like an eternity, watching helplessly as his friend fought for his life. "Ethan, go!" David yelled, his voice strained as a punch left him dazed. The protective instinct finally broke through Ethan's paralysis. Without thinking, he turned, grabbing Charlie and shoving him into the back seat of the car. The boy's eyes met his, wide with fear, but filled with unwavering trust. That brief, quiet moment gave Ethan the strength to move forward. With a sharp pain in his chest, he slammed the car into gear and sped off, the sounds of the struggle slowly fading behind them. In the rearview mirror, Ethan caught a glimpse of David on the ground, his attacker looming over him like a shadow. A mix of fear and guilt twisted in Ethan's gut, tightening around his heart. The road ahead stretched out like a dark tunnel, and the echoes of violence still rang in his ears. His breathing was ragged, and his hands shook as they gripped the steering wheel. From the back seat, Charlie watched him in silence, clutching the turquoise necklace that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "Will we be okay?" Charlie asked quietly, his voice thick with fear that struck at Ethan's heart. "Yes, Charlie. I promise we will," Ethan replied, though the weight of uncertainty gnawed at him with every passing second. They arrived at the safe house just as the first light of dawn began to break. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, a deceptive calm settling over the world after the storm. Ethan ushered Charlie inside, making sure to lock every door and window, his hands still trembling from the tension of the night. Outside, life continued, as if nothing had happened. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, sending a chill through him. He didn't hesitate to answer when he saw Rachel's name on the screen. "Is David okay?" he asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Rachel's voice cracked through the phone, a mix of relief and lingering fear. "He's alive, Ethan. It's a miracle. They found him unconscious on the road. He's in the hospital, and while he's injured, he'll make it. But this is far from over. You know that, don't you?" Ethan closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. They had survived the night, but the real battle had only just begun. The Raven had given his clearest warning yet, and Ethan knew that they wouldn't be so lucky the next time. As he stood in the quiet room, with the first rays of sunlight gently lighting Charlie's face, Ethan made a silent promise. There would be no more running, no more hiding in fear. Ethan would protect Charlie and uncover the truth about Lily, no matter the cost. The attack on the orphanage had changed everything. David, though still recovering in the hospital from his injuries, kept in contact with Ethan, sending encrypted messages and notes about the things he had uncovered. Meanwhile, Ethan stayed at the safe house with Charlie, quietly reaffirming his promises and letting his determination burn brighter with every passing moment. The outside world appeared calm, but Ethan knew it was just a facade. The Raven was out there, waiting, and it was only a matter of time before he would strike again. But this time, Ethan wasn't going to wait for the shadow to find them. He would take the fight to him, calling on his allies and facing the threat on his own terms. Still weak from the attack, David sent a short but crucial message. James has something else to say. Ethan understood immediately that this new information could be the key. A secret meeting was arranged at the remote cabin where James had been hiding, a location that had served as their safe point from the beginning. The night was pitch black, and the wind made the trees groan as Ethan and Rachel made their way to the cabin. Charlie stayed behind with a trusted caretaker, safe in another hiding place. Bringing him along wasn't an option. They couldn't take that risk. When they entered, they found James sitting at a table covered with maps and documents, his face weary but with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We don't have much time," James said, his voice low but urgent. "What I'm about to tell you could change everything." He gestured to a map spread across the table. "This is one of Jack Ross's properties, the businessman we talked about earlier. But it's more than just a mansion. It's an operations center for the Raven and his network. This is where their key meetings happen, and where, according to my sources, Lily was last seen." The silence that followed was suffocating. Hearing Lily's name in this context made Ethan's blood run cold. The pieces were falling into place and the mission ahead became clearer. It wasn't just about protecting Charlie anymore, it was about rescuing Lily, if there was still any chance she was alive. "If we go after this place, we need to be smart about it," James continued. Rachel's voice, filled with resolve but slightly shaky, broke the tension. "We can't let them control the situation. We have to take action before they do." James nodded, turning to the blueprints of the mansion. He pointed to various lines and markings on the map, indicating the entry points and escape routes. Every detail mattered now. "We need a team, and I need to know if you're ready to risk everything, Ethan," James said, his gaze fixed on him. Without hesitation, Ethan responded, "I'll risk everything. This is our one shot to take down the Raven and save Lily. If she's still alive, we'll get her out." The days that followed felt like a race against the clock. From his hospital bed, David helped organize trusted contacts, former members of Lily's humanitarian organization, individuals who understood the stakes and were willing to risk their lives for a cause much bigger than themselves. The conversations were kept short, hushed whispers in the dark, with every detail of the plan carefully considered to avoid raising suspicion. Although Charlie was safe in his hiding spot, he could still sense the tension during the brief moments when Ethan checked in on him. One night, as Ethan was about to leave, Charlie surprised him by wrapping his arms around him tightly. "I know you're going to find her, right?" Charlie whispered, his eyes reflecting a mix of fear and hope. Ethan looked down at him and nodded, his voice shaky. "I'm going to bring her back, and you, little one, will be safe. It will all be over, soon." The day of the assault arrived under a heavy, overcast sky, signaling a storm. It was the perfect cover. The rain and darkness would shield their movements. James, Rachel, Ethan, and the team David had assembled positioned themselves around the mansion. Jack Ross's estate stood towering, surrounded by high walls and top-notch security systems, a symbol of its owner's power. "We're going in to get her," Ethan said into the earpiece, his voice clear and firm, resonating in every team member's ear. "And we're going to show the Raven that his shadows don't scare us." The operation began. In an instant, the mansion's power went out, thanks to a saboteur working the power lines. The doors were breached, and despite the security measures, they moved quickly through the halls. The guards, caught off guard by the speed and precision of the assault, were taken down one by one. The air was thick with tension, so palpable that Ethan could feel it with every breath he took. He moved through the halls, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the marble floors, as he searched for the signal that would lead him to Lily. Finally, he reached a door, the only one guarded by 2 armed men. With James's help, who created a diversion, Ethan struck. In the blink of an eye, the guards were neutralized. He pushed the door open, and what he saw inside made him freeze. In the center of the room, bathed in the dim light of a lamp, was Lily. Thin, her hair tangled, and her face etched with exhaustion, but alive. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw Ethan, they filled with tears as recognition hit her. "Ethan!" Her voice was a whisper, full of disbelief and relief. He hurried to her side, quickly removing the restraints as the sounds of battle raged around them. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if to make up for the 5 years of pain and separation. But there was no time for sentimentality. The Raven was still out there, and the real fight was just beginning. The moment to confront the force behind it all was drawing near, and Ethan knew it would be the most crucial moment of his life. His heart pounded in his chest, the rhythm matching the urgency of the situation as he held Lily close. The room, lit only by a flickering lamp, felt like a world apart from the chaos unfolding elsewhere in the mansion. The shouts of commands, the distant gunshots, and the hurried footsteps seemed like background noise in that brief instant, where only Lily's face, her wide-eyed look of disbelief, and the spark of hope in her eyes mattered. "I found you," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking as he gently stroked Lily's face. She tried to smile, but the weariness and pain were evident in every line of her expression. "I knew you'd come," she replied weakly, her fingers trembling as they brushed his cheek. "But it's not safe. They have more children, Ethan. This isn't over." Their quiet moment was abruptly interrupted by a loud noise echoing down the hallway. James appeared in the doorway, his face drenched with sweat, and a gun in his hand. "We need to move. Reinforcements are coming, and the Raven is still here." James's gaze softened for a moment as he looked at Lily. "I'm glad to see you're alive." Lily nodded faintly and attempted to rise, her legs shaking with the effort. Ethan was right there, steadying her, not letting go. "Where is he?" Ethan asked, his voice low, his eyes narrowing in on James's every word. Before James could answer, the sound of deliberate, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. The air seemed to thicken, and a tall figure, dressed in black and with a mask covering half of his face, appeared in the doorway. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Ethan and Lily with a look that mixed disdain with something darker. "So you've finally arrived, Ethan Varela," the Raven said, his voice deep, unsettlingly calm. "What a touching reunion." Lily stiffened, taking a step back, gripping Ethan's arm, but his eyes never left the man who had haunted his nightmares for so long. "You have no idea how long I've waited for this moment," Ethan responded, his voice steady but laced with simmering anger that had been building for years. The Raven chuckled briefly, a hollow sound that seemed to echo in the room. "And look at you now, like some kind of storybook hero," he taunted. "But this isn't the happy ending you think it is. Charlie, the boy you're so intent on protecting, is more than you realize. And though you think you've won, this is just the beginning of the game." James raised his gun, but the Raven raised a hand, signaling to the shadows. More footsteps were heard, and 2 armed men appeared behind him, guns aimed directly at Ethan and Lily. The tension in the room was unbearable. Ethan clenched his jaw, thinking quickly. There was no time to waste. He needed to get Lily to safety and back to Charlie. But first, he had to deal with the Raven. "The game's over for you. This is where it ends," Ethan said, stepping forward, while keeping his eyes fixed on the dark gaze of the man in front of him. The Raven raised an eyebrow, but before he could respond, Lily, summoning one last burst of strength, broke free from Ethan's grasp. She shoved a nearby piece of furniture, creating a loud crash that distracted the armed men for just a moment. That fraction of a second was all they needed. James fired, hitting one of the men who fell with a scream. Ethan immediately lunged at the Raven, slamming into him with all his weight. The two collided to the floor in a violent struggle. The Raven's mask was knocked off, revealing a face Ethan recognized, one he had seen in business meetings and photographs. It was Jack Ross, the well-known businessman. "Always so predictable, Varela," Jack sneered, trying to break free, a twisted smile spreading across his face. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." "I know exactly what I've gotten into," Ethan shot back, landing a punch that stunned Jack. James moved quickly, restraining Jack and gagging him. Lily, gasping for breath, stepped toward Ethan. Their hands met, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. But the sound of reinforcements approaching brought them back to reality. "We have to leave now," James urged, pulling Jack along as the others sprinted toward the exit. The escape path was fraught with danger, but with every step, the feeling of freedom and justice for Lily and Charlie grew more real. And with Jack Ross in their control, Ethan knew the real battle was just beginning. The cold morning air hit them as they ran through the hallways of Jack Ross's mansion, the weight of the Crow's true identity, Jack's, settling heavily over them. Gunshots and shouting echoed in the distance, growing nearer with every second. Jack, bound and dragged by James, shot them all deadly glares, his cruel smile still intact despite his defeat. "You won't make it out of here alive," he sneered, his hollow laugh echoing through the hallway. For a moment, Ethan stopped, fury welling inside him as he glared back at Jack. But Lily's warm, steady hand on his arm pulled him back to reality. Her eyes, full of love and determination, reminded him of what truly mattered. "Don't listen to him. Just focus on getting out of here," she said, her voice a mixture of urgency and tenderness. The emergency lights flickered erratically, and the sound of footsteps closing in from all directions intensified the panic that was beginning to rise in the air. Ethan led the group toward a side exit marked on the map James had provided. As they moved, Lily struggled to keep pace, her strength fading from years of captivity and the emotional toll of their reunion. When they finally reached the outside, the cold night air hit them hard, but the brief taste of freedom was quickly shattered. A group of armed men emerged at the edge of the garden, their guns aimed directly at them. The sharp crack of gunfire broke the silence, and the sound was swallowed by the vast night. Ethan dropped to the ground, yanking Lily down with him as bullets zipped by. James, positioned ahead, took out two of the men before a shot struck him in the shoulder. He screamed, but stayed on his feet, struggling to keep Jack under control. "Keep moving! Don't stop!" he yelled, his voice strained with pain, refusing to give up despite the agony. Ethan and Lily scrambled to their feet and made a break for the gate, the edge of the property. The cold sweat and adrenaline blurred their vision, but the hope of reaching the car, of escaping with their lives, and the truth they had fought so hard to uncover, kept them pushing forward. A shot rang out, and everything seemed to slow. Ethan instinctively turned, watching in horror as Lily crumpled to the ground, her body folding in a way that seemed unnatural. The world stood still. The sounds of gunfire faded, and all he could hear was his own scream, a deep, painful cry that shattered the silence. "Lily." He ran to her, collapsing beside her. Her eyes, which had once been filled with strength and determination, now struggled to stay open. Blood pooled from her chest, staining her clothes and the ground beneath them. "No, don't you dare leave me," Ethan whispered, his hands shaking as he tried in vain to stop the bleeding. Lily looked at him, a faint smile forming on her lips as she reached up to touch his face. "You did it, Ethan. You found me," she whispered, her voice growing weaker with each breath. "Protect Charlie. Promise me." Tears streamed uncontrollably down Ethan's face. With each passing moment, he felt the world shatter around him. His teeth clenched, unable to speak, but his frantic nod sealed the promise that would haunt him forever. "I love you," was the last thing Lily whispered before her eyes closed for the last time. The sounds of the battle roared back to life, and reality crashed into Ethan like an unrelenting wave. Shouts, gunfire, and the sound of reinforcements' footsteps merged into a chaotic frenzy. James, bloodied but still holding Jack in check, shouted to him from a distance, the urgency in his voice barely cutting through Ethan's fog of grief. "Ethan, we have to go now," he yelled, his voice cracking with pain and desperation. With his heart broken and a fierce rage building inside him, Ethan stood, leaving Lily's lifeless body behind on the cold ground. Her smile, her laughter, the strength with which she had loved him, were burned into his memory. With one final glance at her, he made himself a promise. Her sacrifice would not be in vain. "Let's go," he said to James, his voice raw but resolute. They ran toward the exit, the shadow of tragedy trailing behind them, and the fire of vengeance igniting in Ethan's chest. News of the operation at Jack Ross's mansion spread like wildfire. Images of police and forensic teams entering the property, and Jack, defeated and disfigured, were all over the media, creating an unexpected scandal. But for Ethan, the outside world felt distant and irrelevant. The hole left by Lily's death was infinite, and nothing, not even the fall of the Raven and his network, could fill the void in his heart. Ethan stood alone in the Varela mansion, in the same study where he had spent countless nights searching for answers, chasing shadows, waiting for a miracle that would bring him back to the life he once knew. But now, everything had changed. Lily's chair, her books, and her personal belongings still filled the space, but she was gone. He ran his fingers over the pages of Lily's diary, feeling the weight of her words, as if she were still there, whispering them in his ear. David, who had just been discharged from the hospital with his arm in a sling, walked into the study without a word. In the days following their confrontation, he had been gathering evidence and testimonies to ensure Jack Ross and his associates would be held accountable. But upon seeing Ethan, he knew that the victories in the world outside meant little compared to the grief his friend was carrying. "The evidence is solid, Ethan. Ross and his network won't escape this," David said, his voice firm. "The testimonies, the documents we recovered, they all point to them being locked away for the rest of their lives," David continued, trying to offer some comfort. Ethan nodded, not taking his eyes off the diary. His fingers stopped on a page that was marked, one where Lily had written a line that now echoed in his mind. "Even in the darkest shadows, light finds a way." A lump formed in his throat, and for the first time in days, tears began to fall freely. "You did it, Ethan. Not only did you free Charlie and the other kids, but you also dismantled a network that had torn lives apart for years," David said, his voice heavy but compassionate. "Lily, she would be proud," he added softly. "Proud," Ethan echoed, his voice cracking. "I would give everything, David, every achievement, every sacrifice, just to see her smile again, to hear her voice, to tell her I love her, and that I'd do it all over again for the rest of my life." Silence settled between them, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards under their feet. David placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a simple gesture, yet filled with understanding. But now, "I promise I'll take care of you," Ethan replied, feeling the weight of his own words as he gently stroked the boy's hair. Charlie looked up at him, tears welling in his eyes, with a maturity that seemed beyond his years. "She's still watching over us, right? From wherever she is?" he asked, his voice shaky. Ethan nodded, unable to speak, but knowing in his heart that Charlie was right. Lily, through her sacrifice, had done more than he ever realized. Now that the network had been taken down and the Raven exposed, her legacy was far greater than the tragedy. It was a fire that would continue to burn, guiding them through the darkest times. That night, under the vast expanse of stars in the orphanage garden, Ethan reflected on the losses he had endured, but also on what remained. The battle was far from over, and the scars from loss ran deep, but so did the promise to move forward. In that moment, he understood that the light Lily had mentioned in her diary still burned brightly, now carried by him and Charlie. They were ready to build a future beyond the pain and shadows. The days following the fall of the Raven's network and the capture of Jack Ross were a whirlwind. News of the dismantling of one of the most powerful human trafficking rings sent shockwaves through society. Influential figures and complicit businessmen were arrested, and the truth emerged, exposing corruption at the highest levels of power. Ethan, however, avoided the spotlight and cameras. The fight he had fought was intensely personal, and Lily's loss still left a gaping wound that was slowly beginning to heal. But he knew he couldn't let himself fall into despair. Charlie, along with the other children saved by Lily's courage and the sacrifice of many, needed a fresh start, a purpose, a home. The Casa del Sol orphanage became the heart of their new beginning. Ethan, with Rachel and a dedicated team of volunteers and professionals, worked endlessly to turn the place into a sanctuary of hope and healing. What had once been a temporary shelter was now a home where the children could find peace, grow, and envision brighter futures. On a sunny spring afternoon, a new wing was opened in honor of Lily, celebrating her courage and sacrifice. The laughter and games of the children filled the air, bringing a vitality that had been missing for far too long. Standing before a plaque bearing Lily's name, Ethan took a quiet moment to close his eyes, recalling her face, her voice, and the promises he had made to her. The grief still lingered, but there was also a sense of peace and purpose that was new. "She would be so proud of all of this," Rachel said, walking up to him with a soft smile. Ethan nodded, his expression softening as he watched Charlie, who was helping the other kids paint a mural. At that moment, Charlie spotted him and ran over, his face lighting up with a smile that blended innocence and the bravery he had shown during the darkest times. "Ethan, can you come? We're painting the sky like she used to do in my dreams," Charlie said, his voice brimming with excitement. Ethan smiled, the weight in his chest easing as he saw the joy in the boy. "Of course, Charlie. Let's do it together." As they painted, Ethan remembered Lily's words from her diary. "Even in the darkest shadows, light finds a way." Now, he truly understood what she had meant. The light he had lost when Lily left hadn't disappeared. It lived on, in the small moments, in the children's laughter, in Charlie's strength, and in the drive to move forward, creating something that Lily would have cherished and fought for. That evening, after a full day of celebration and work, Ethan sat on the orphanage's porch, watching the sun set behind the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange. Charlie came over, holding a sketch pad. He sat beside Ethan and flipped it open, showing a series of drawings filled with colors, landscapes, and smiling figures. "I made this so we'll always remember that she was protecting us," Charlie said, pointing to a drawing of a dark-haired woman standing under a starry sky, surrounded by laughing children. Ethan put his arm around Charlie's shoulders, and together they gazed at the drawing in silence. The pain was still there, but so was a renewed sense of conviction. Moving forward, honoring Lily's memory, was the most fitting tribute they could give her. Together, they had faced the shadows and had found a way to keep the light alive. As the night progressed and the stars began to shine, Ethan looked up at the sky, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that Lily was there, watching over them, taking care of them, and that in her memory, they would always find the strength to keep going. Thank you for joining us on this incredible story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell for more exciting content. Take care and see you in the next video. Bye.